So just click done.
So you click done, and that will set up your conditions. So now your conditions is all set up. So now you have your conditions set up. Um, Obviously note there that you get charged 10 cents a month, which is a small amount to pay for keeping your site up. And then there's the other piece which is interesting, the actions, where you can actually set up your actions and rules is what we're going to talk about next. So if you click on add a new action group,
Okay,
you can
so
actually configure,
I'll create a new one.
yeah, you can create a new action group if you want to.
Okay.
Then that way we can walk through the steps. Then the next one is send notification.
Okay, so in here you're picking whether or not you want to send it to an Azure role of some kind, like the
Yeah, Azure role, yeah, or do
contributor.
so yeah, Azure role, or you want to do push notification if you have SMS or email, which is really what you want to do. If you have Azure roles, it will be the distribution list in that Azure role that you have. So, but we're not set that we haven't set that up at all. So we're just gonna go with a simple out of the box. Okay, you want to use email, you
Okay.
want to use SMS, you want to do post notification, you want to do voice. I mean, and each of these will be sent to them independently. So uh, we just have to choose wisely which ones that we need.
Oh, so it will actually leave you a voice message. I wonder what it says. Does it say your site is trash?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I haven't tested the voice one, but yeah, you can actually send it to a voice maker and leave a voice message and
Okay.
to do all those. So for now, it looks like we're just checking for email,
Yeah.
and
The
we
email.
click OK to that. So now we know who we're going to be sending it to.
Now
Then
the
you click.
action type here seems to have a lot of options that are pretty cool.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, this is the part that's interesting. So you could use it. I've used a runbook before. An automation runbook will actually can actually do things to your application if it hits an error. It can restart the whole function app. It can do something else, but you have to build the actual PowerShell scripts or whatever tools you're using to act on a certain type of error to your application on your behalf. You do need a SPI, or what we call is a service principal identity, that will allow you to communicate back to your function, that has access to communicate back to your function to perform some actions on your behalf.
But
Those types of stuff.
theoretically, you could set up a system that's highly resilient by having these automation runbooks that basically do stuff,
Hmm.
and then you just point to the right runbook based on the actual event that's being triggered, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So you build a runbook exactly. So you do that. And Azure functions are interesting because you can point to another Azure function that's out of scope of your existing Azure function to act on your behalf.
Wow.
So you
And
can
then
point to
Logic
another.
App just uses Logic App to basically do
Yeah.
what the runbook would do. It just automates
Yeah, it automates
service
maybe if you're
calls.
trying to let's assume you have something like Teams or Slack or some other messaging tool, you can use Logic Apps to wire up a notification that way as well.
And the webhook would just make a webhook call out
Right.
to.
Yeah, so if you have a production support website or maybe you have a NOC that has an endpoint, and there's a disconnection between your Azure function and the NOC, meaning that the NOC can have integration. You can actually just send messages in a certain format to the service hook that's provided by the NOC or the production supports site, and they will just capture that message and display on their environment. So that works very well for disconnected systems.
So you could actually do something as cool as when an error is triggered,
Hmm.
it could call a webhook that maybe sends a message to a Slack group or maybe puts a ticket into your ticketing system.
Right. So for disconnect, for example, if you have a ticketing system like ServiceNow, or maybe you're using something like Salesforce, or you have other third-party ticketing systems that don't integrate well with Azure, or it's not even part of Azure, but you want to be able to capture exceptions from Azure, you can actually use a service hook and a secure hook or a webhook, and that will allow you to send custom messages based on the output from errors to that endpoint, and then to display as creating a ticket or displaying information on a website, depending on what choices that they want to do with that message.
That's pretty powerful. And they do have ITSM set up here. which I believe is
Yeah,
some
well,
kind
I
of.
will never use that feature. I mean, it's a big, obviously it's a ticketing system, but I think it's only isolated to Azure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
It's not general. It's not as general as just using
It's
a
not.
webhook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah, it's not. Yes, yeah, you're right. It's not as easy as using that. So if you want to keep all your ticketing within Azure, then that would make sense.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do almost like an infinite loop,
Hmm.
and over here,
No, that's a very bad idea.
I'm
I mean,
actually going to now call the function again, but this time call it correctly.
correct. Yeah, and that's a very good. That's a good trick because that way we can actually capture errors
Yeah,
generated,
generated one way or
good
the other.
responses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then theoretically, for different kinds of errors, you could have different strings being passed into your webhook so that
Right.
you know how to route it in your down level system, right?
Yeah. So you tied an action group to an alert, a particular alert. So if you're getting a 400 versus a 500, you have an action group that actually would understand how to handle a 400 error.
Okay.
That's how you do it. Yeah.
And then you can, and over here, it seems like you can do multiple things together. You don't
You
have to
can,
just
yeah,
do
you can
one.
actually, yeah, that's what's cool about this. You can actually send a message out to a webhook saying, okay, this went down, and you can actually ask some custom message saying that we're going to run the automation runbook to restart the actual function app.
Okay.
Yeah,
So this is quite powerful and way more powerful than current systems where basically it's all based on pulling a web URL somewhere, right? This sort of
hmm,
like gets to the meat and potatoes of everything and allows you to really um, be very comprehensive about the kinds of errors that you're receiving, right?
right.
Okay, so we have this all set up. We're not going to do any tags because
No
we're
tags today. Yeah,
maniacs.
that you can create,
And there you have it. That is
and there you have
created.
it. So there you have it. So now we have, and now the other part that we can talk about while we're on this page before we leave this page, if you scroll down further, some of the alerts that you can associate with the severity is, and then severity is obviously depending on which company you're in. You might look at informational, you might look at I think the options are critical, and the one is warnings. And depending on what you would call a 500, in my case, a 500 is a huge severity because
Yeah.
technically nothing is working. So but if you have like a 444, you might not consider that as severe because your page is not found, meaning that you never really deploy that page out at all, or someone is going to URL that doesn't is not supported by the website. So that might be more on the informational warning. So, but in terms of 500s or 400s, some of those other errors might be on the critical, or in most cases, a 400 or 500 to me is a critical error.
So this
Anything
is
else?
kind of amazing because I could almost see a scenario where I'm a single developer and I've built something and I've set up all kinds of logging. And anytime, ultimately as a developer, what you don't want is you don't want your site to crash, in a
Right,
horrible way, right? So anytime any kind of crash like that happens, it actually pings me with the page where the request that happened,
right,
and maybe puts it all into an Azure DevOps task that I can then go in and I know, hey, I need to fix this, and this, right?
correct. Yeah.
Like anytime there's any kind of errors, I can pinpoint those errors within my application and then just go and fix them, right?
And the most critical part about it is that you know how frequently these errors are happening and what's triggering these errors during the course of a given day.
Yes.
So high peak times, low peak times, certain types of payloads have been sent in that raises this 500 errors. So it gives you an understanding of where you actually are getting these errors. So it's almost like a self triage solution that you can use to help you fix problems much more quicker
No,
in your
that is
application.
extremely powerful.
Yeah. So once that rule is created, you're good to go. You know what I mean? You're gonna that rule is kicking in now. I don't know whether we're still running automation thing. It should have finished by now. I think the page is done. I think
No,
we
it's
set
still
it for 30.
going. We 30 seconds and 200. So that's going to be
Oh, still going for a while, yeah.
Yeah.
So we should start capturing. I mean, at some point we start getting alerts that are going to be coming out from here. The reason why you're not seeing anything else there, Ed, is because your zoom level is too high. You need to take it down to an
Ah,
hour. You have it in 2 minutes. So if you do the undo the zoom in there on the right side, just do undo zoom. You get and if you click the yeah this yeah, so you can see that
yes, I have 30
you
now.
got
Yeah.
30 errors so far that's come through in that span of time, because that's going over the last it's going over a day period, I think now. So that's the reason why you're just focusing in that area.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So
Mhm.
here's exactly the difference between those two systems because it's 30 errors altogether. That would be the total, right?
Right.
But but when I go in here, I'm seeing 3 errors happen here,
Uh-huh.
right? Like 9 errors happen here. It's sort of so that's sort of like as an
Well, that's
example of
yeah.
the
So that's
difference.
a window base. So it's gonna the
Yeah.
total errors we talked about earlier is based on the frequency and the time that it needs to go back and look equals total number. So even if you're getting 30 errors over a period of 1 hour, you might not get any exceptions because it's going to look only 5 minutes and look for a total amount of errors that you've captured if you set up that way.
Okay.
Which can be, which could, like I say, can be false positives because you could be getting exceptions all day,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
window, you're just missing the window every time you run it,
Yeah.
and you have a threshold which is too high, and that equates to no alerts being sent out. So
Okay.
those are the challenges you can have. So and typically, I mean, you don't get errors in your system all day long. I mean, you're gonna get errors sporadically to your systems, or you might have a scenario where you have a slew of errors coming in over a period of time because a lot of people are sending the wrong piece of data, and those could be missed
Okay.
if your the frequency is not it's not frequent enough, and your threshold is too high. If your threshold is low enough and your frequency is high enough, you should be able to get all the errors that are passed into your application at any point in time.
Okay, so you've that's great. Now we've sort of gone through and looked at using metrics
Hmm.
to basically create alerts and things of that nature. But there are two kinds of ways that an application is going to raise an alert. One of them, and what we've been looking at here, it's almost at a infrastructure or resource level right now, right? Because we're really
Right.
talking about a 500 error. So how would you work with an error? Let's say I wanted to raise an alert anytime somebody passed in a message that passed in a name that started with the letter B, right?
Right.
How could we does Azure and does this capability, does it allow for that level of granularity where you're really almost like inspecting the message structure and inspecting the logs that are being created by the developers and then making the same kind of cool decisions that we just did from that?
No, it doesn't. So it's like this doesn't accommodate for that. This actually focuses on built-in functionality, obviously, that Microsoft gives you. It's very high level, so it's mostly around CPU memory and just the out-of-the-box errors that you're seeing on that list. For you to actually get into a deeper dive, okay, I want to inspect certain pieces of payload. First of all, the first thing you got to do is inside of a code base, you have to make sure you make that available through the logs. So I think previously we looked at what logs are and how beneficial they are.
Yeah.
Not only can you capture logs in your code base, you can add additional value by actually using those logs you're capturing to be able to raise alerts inside of applications. And that's a huge benefit because now you can also inspect the content that's been passed into your application and then use that to raise alerts in case you see certain type of information being passed in. So a good example, if you're working with PII data, or if you're working with information that you don't expect your application to periodically have in the system, like maybe social security or something else that you don't want, you want to make sure that it's being passed in, but you also want to make sure that it's passing not too frequently to your system, you can actually use something like application insights. Now, obviously, we don't recommend doing that, but we could use that as an example. So in this case, I think in your code, you had a specific log. If you go back to your code base in
Yeah.
Azure, we can just pick something and just use that as our baseline.
So in my code, I
Mhm.
am logging the whole, I'm logging the name here, right?
Right.
So theoretically, and that's what I was getting to, is
Yeah, you could pass
basically
in.
what can we do? I know we can't do it with the metrics, but what capabilities exist? And can you show how, can we walk through how we would be able to sort of like create that scenario where if a name starts with B,
Mhm.
right, it sends an alert out.
Yeah, so we can go. So we can, if we can move over to application insights, and then we can shift. Then we can go into that resource, and
Okay.
then we're going to do this, a similar type of setup with alerts, but we're going to leave here and go into app insights. I don't know whether you can see it there, or you have to go into the resource group and grab it from there.
Actually, there we go.
Hmm.
Okay. And so this is it, the Echo Storage Insights.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're here now.
Yeah,
Wow, I can see all those
you can see
failures.
also we can just walk through some of these things before we even go into deeper dive. So obviously inside our application insights, you do get the same amount of errors. You do get server response times. You get a little bit more. You get the server errors and you get availability as well. So this is what application insight does. It's a little bit more richer. It's not really focused more on the platform, but it actually captures a lot of the activity in terms of connectivity or TCP/IP calls that are coming in and out of your application versus CPU and memory. It doesn't really focus on all that. Now, if you go into live metrics, which is one of the cool stuff that I use, if you click that, that actually tells you the behavior in real time, how your application is doing. If that's connected and wired up correctly, it should start up. And when this is connected, it's going down.
There we go.
There we go. So that gives you the calls that are coming in. It tells you the duration of the request. It tells you all your dependencies that have been touched. It also tells you the number of instances that are being ran. So if you scroll down, it shows you that you only have one instance run. So if you, normally in the consumption plan, if you have high number of API traffic, the consumption plan will automatically spin up new instances for you when you reach a certain threshold in terms of memory usage.
Hmm.
So that's what a consumption plan gives you, is you keep consuming as much API traffic as possible, and to maintain the consistency by spinning up new instances as needed to accommodate the request load that's coming in. So that's a good feature to use when you want to understand in real time how your application is behaving and where the bottlenecks are in terms of CPU usage, exception rate, which we can say an exception rate is coming in every 30 seconds. Is that's a real time feed that's coming in. And then you have the CPU usage, which is next to none. There's no real memory we're using right now. And we're not hitting any dependencies. Like if we had a storage account that we had a dependency on, you would see the dependency call duration being hit as well, and the call rate and the failures in that area as well. So that's kind of a quick overview there.
Okay.
If you go to the what we want to focus on is actually the alerts, which is part of application insight, which is slightly more different than what we're looking at when we were looking at it from the application point of view.
Can we first query it? Can you show how to query it in logs so we can kind of
Yeah,
see
so
that
if
data?
you go back to the performance tab or hit the logs from there, it's up to you, however you want to go. You can
Logs.
hit
Okay.
logs first. And what we can do is build a query
Okay.
that's looking for information around what you're looking for. So if you shrink that screen that you're in and expand that one.
Hmm.
So yeah.
I can
Yeah,
use
there you go. Yeah.
traces, right?
Yeah. So App Insight has a lot of cool stuff. It has everything you see inside App Insight is technically a table. It's what we call a virtual table. Availability results, browsing times, custom events, which I use a lot. So you can put custom messages in there. Custom metrics that dependencies, what I mentioned before, which actually talks to storage accounts. Exceptions is really specifically to the 500 exceptions. So if you type in exceptions right now, just to
Okay.
highlight what we're talking about, if you type in exceptions and you just don't remove the pipe, you don't need the pipe in there, just take the pipe out and just run that. That will give you all your exceptions that you've had in the last 24 hours without doing anything. So if you're a developer and you are having exceptions of all types of exceptions that are coming out, You can drill down into exceptions to tell you, it's almost like a stack trace, to give a stack trace of all the information that you're having. In this case, you throw an exception, you don't have underlying code, so you're only going to get one stack. But if you had underlying code like libraries that you depend on, you get a stack trace that will drill down into and let you know where the exception happened. Just happened just in the entry of the function. But if you have libraries, it will tell you where in the libraries that exception happens, which
And
is
it
pretty
looks
cool.
like it's actually capturing our exception specifically. So in
Yeah,
there, it
because you
actually
asked for
says
it. Yeah,
the
yeah,
interval exception.
yeah. It will, because you actually capture the exception as part of the exception you have. And there is a stack actually. If you scroll up a little bit, you can scroll up a little bit more. You will see there was a power stack that I saw. Scroll down slowly. Keep going down slowly. Keep going down a little bit more. There you go. See the details in there?
Yes.
That gives you that. And then if you open that up, it will give you more details around the exception. If you want to drill down, then you have two stacks, which is 0 and 1, which is only 2 levels deep. And I'll give you more. So if you have a library, or within a library, or you have a DLL that has the dependencies, that stack gets bigger and bigger.
So what you're saying here is that if I enable App Insights
Hmm.
and I do nothing else, I just enable App Insights, I can get rid of all that raggedy code I have where I'm querying I'm querying a database and inserting rows with basically all this data, right?
Right.
I can just come in here, use this to query all that stuff, and I get the same information, if not more information, all in
Yeah,
context.
yeah, that is very, you can actually build out a report from this, and you can actually have that in a dashboard if you want to go there, but we're not going to cover that today. But you're right, what the typical Log4j does, or like a database logger, or even Splunk, or one of these systems used to capture exceptions, we can actually just have that straight in application insights for really not a lot of work. I mean, to get it in here, and you can see that exceptions are captured here. And the traces is actually interesting, because if you go to traces, that's where we're gonna set up the rule. Traces are more tracking the activity of all the logs which you've captured over time. So it's like it will capture all the steps into the application, the information, the warnings, anything that you have, the starting the host, ending the host. So you can really drill down into, okay, what am I really looking for in here? If you look at the host
There we go,
information,
Jacob.
yeah, it shows all the information. Jacob, you had Jacob in your code. You must have logged Jacob at some point.
Yes.
It will pick up, it's a echo ended. So if you want to focus on just saying where the message is equals to Jacob, or the message is equals to 457, it will capture all that information for you. And that's where we're going to spend time in. This is where we're going to focus on certain types of information that's coming in as a message. We can actually write a trace, and then we can use a where clause that has it is. So we can write that now. So we do a pipe after the trace,
Mm-hmm.
and then you say where message
And it
has.
starts with,
Yeah,
yeah.
just to start with or has. I use message has or starts with.
Oh, B. So we're looking
Yeah,
for B.
yeah. So you can run that and test it out.
So right now,
And
no results are there because we don't have anything that comes with B, but
it,
that's
it
the
should,
whole plan,
yeah,
right?
it should, yeah. But if you try J, for example,
There we go, Jacob.
yeah. So now we have Jacob and job host. Job host started because they both start with J. But if you want to get more specific, you can use JOC, and then you can just focus on just Jacob.
And we can query against any of these things, right? So I could sort of like look into this to try to figure out what the difference between Jacob and this other one is, so that I can kind of like get the right, like I
Yeah,
can
you can.
query deeper than just looking at the message, right?
Yeah, you can put some parameters inside of it, saying that even though you're looking for where message equals to Jacob, you might say add something in that is very specific that will only bring back Jacob.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So yeah, so you can do something like that if you wanted to, but you have to add another property in your where clause to actually ensure that it only comes back to Jacob. So you have to look for something that's unique. So if you open up the first message at the top, um,
They're pretty
that
much the same,
they're pretty much the
unfortunately.
same message. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's nothing different from one versus another.
No, because they're both
Right.
essentially like log information logs. If it was a
Right.
different trace type, it would probably show.
Yeah, and that's where custom events come in. Custom events are very specific because custom events don't do traces, they don't do exceptions, they only do custom events. So you want to capture specific messages, what we recommend is that you use what they call custom events. And custom events is a JSON-based solution. It allows you to pass in an object, it will serialize it for you, and then it will serialize it to JSON and send it in. So if you're passing an object into your UI and you want to just pass it directly into custom events, you just record it as a JSON payload.
Okay, so I'm just gonna use the name of the operation because I see one here. It says operation underscore name equals.
So there you go. So if you know what node operation is, and that would be a way of changing.
There we go.
Yeah, the operation name is echo service.
Yeah.
So now you're only going to look for entries that have echo service, and now you get one back. So now we've narrowed down what we want to search on, and we can actually save it, or we can actually just copy it. In this case, we just go with a straight copy. We don't have to save it today. We just do a straight copy.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll move over to the actual alerts. We set up alerts that will capture.
So go back to alerts.
Inside of App Insights, yeah.
Okay. So add a new rule.
No, inside of there, yeah, you're okay. I think there's a delay on your end, so I mean, just then you add a new alert. Then in there you follow the actual steps. Once you add a new alert in there.
So in this case, this would be a log alert, right?
Yeah. So in this case, what you're doing, yeah, just adding a new condition, and that condition will be your
that, right?
Yeah. I see custom log search, yeah. In App Insights, yeah. That should give you the option to, yeah. So now you can add you see where it says search query? You can paste that in there. You should have one entry in the last 30 minutes. Yeah, it's interesting. It doesn't show
It's
up.
been longer. Oh, there we go.
Oh, is it delay? I didn't see it.
Yeah, it showed up.
Okay. So the same rule applies here. Yeah, it's coming up now. It's just taking a while. It was taking a while to show up. That's fine. So the same rule applies here. It's the same pattern and practice we're doing for the metrics, where we have to set up how often we want to look at it. If it comes greater than 1 or greater than 0, depending on how you want to set it up, and you can attach email alerts to that, and you should get notifications as well. So that should work.
So what's presenting here is strange. It's, as I go up and down this thing, it's showing me, oh, okay, so this is the time. Okay, I see. So I've been actually moving back and forth. I see.
Right.
So it's not an up and down thing. These have just been one alert we're getting one alert every couple of minutes. Okay.
Well, the reason why I get alerts every couple minutes is because the ingestion time is every 5 minutes, right?
Okay. So this rule that we just created basically, and this is really the ultimate, right? Because ultimately, as a developer, as you said, I can in my code pass things into App Insights that from a logging and monitoring perspective, I can query to help drive the automation of the application, right?
Right.
Okay.
And there's a concept where we had back in the day, they had web trends, which is basically a way of understanding how people go into your websites and what people leave your websites. Or in this case, you have an API, you want to see what people are doing within your API. You can actually put tags in your logs to indicate where they are in each phase in your API, and you can capture that information and use that to set up alerts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been a great video. I think we've, it's pretty amazing what you can do here.
Yeah.
Quickly make this a 1.
Yeah, and it's the same type of setup that you have for the telemetry from here on out is
So I can pick the same action group as an
the
example.
action group. You can pick the same flow. You can do every 30 minutes. You can do action groups.
Looks like
Uh,
over here you can actually add an email subject as well to
right,
distinguish.
yeah, you can,
So
yeah.
this is almost a little bit more comprehensive
But
than,
yeah, you have the option to do an email
yeah.
subject. You can include a custom JSON payload that will be very specific to the information that you're sending out.
So the idea with this custom JSON payload is to somehow provide some a general parsing, general data context around the message that's going to be sent out to wherever it's being sent to, so that you
Exactly, yeah. So they
can
can,
parse.
if you're looking at an action, certain type of action, you might have a JSON payload that represents what somebody else would do with that information if they get a certain type of action. And if
Okay.
that JSON payload can be ingested through a service hook on the other end, they can just react to that JSON payload and do something with it. Maybe send a Slack message or open up a task or whatever that needs to be done.
Okay. And this would be just informational because
Yeah, you don't really do anything.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, and you can actually suppress the alerts after a while. So this would be that totals thing you were talking about.
right.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been a great video and a
Mm.
great start. Thank you, Obi, for walking us through this. I now have probably the most powerful Hello World Azure function ever created, or close to it.
Right.
um, and yeah, we're gonna continue to be doing these great videos. So tune in, drop a like, and subscribe, of course. If you want to learn about Azure for free, this is premium content. We have here a real guru of the technology. And if you were going to go to college and spend $50,000, you'd only get like 1 or 2 semesters from him. But here you are getting him for free. Subscribe, leverage it. And once again, OB Enterprise Architect, and his product is XenHey, spelled XenHey. Links will be in the description. Thank you, Obi, for joining us and explaining this to us. And we will see you in our next videos. Thank you.
Thank you.